It's the middle of the night. You're in the middle of the sea. Just picture it. Picture it in your mind, please. Don't over-spiritualize the text. Just picture everything that I say right now, please. It's the middle of the night. You're in the middle of the sea on a ship, and you see something or someone walking on water. Are you going to be afraid? Of course. This is exactly what happened to the disciples in the Bible. They seen somebody walking on water, and they're like, yo, is that a ghost, or what is that? And so when Christ comes on, he's like, guys, okay, be of good cheer. It is I. Be not afraid. And so when Peter sees that's Christ now, he doesn't wait for Christ to come. He's like, Christ, really, if that's you, bid me to come to thee on the water. And so we pick up the story now in the book of Matthew, chapter 14 and verse 29, where Jesus replies, and he said unto him, come. And as Peter was come down out of the ship, he walked on water to go to Jesus. But when he saw the wind boisterous, he was afraid, and beginning to sink, he cried, Lord, save me. And immediately Jesus put forth his hand and caught him, and said unto him, O thou of little faith, wherefore didst thou doubt? Friends, here we see a perfect picture of the gospel. Jesus Christ is walking on water. The question is how? Clearly, it's not through human power. There's never ever been a man to have walked on water. No, but clearly we see Jesus Christ through divine power is doing that which is impossible. Friends, the gospel is how God through you literally can accomplish the impossible. And so here we see Jesus Christ lived an impossible life through divine power. But we see here that though this life is impossible, the life that Christ lived, this is not something that cannot be attained. Why? Because what is impossible with man is possible with God. And so here we see a divine element in the picture, mankind walking on water. And then we see Peter, what? Doing the very same thing that Jesus Christ did. How? By faith. Friends, remember when Peter began to sink? What did Christ say? Peter, why did you doubt? Why did you lack faith? And so clearly Peter began to walk on water. How? By faith. So Peter began to do the impossible through the power of God, even living a life that Jesus Christ lived. How? By faith. Friends, many people don't believe that this is possible. This is why Christ spoke about the broad way and the narrow way. He said, listen, there's only going to be a few amount of people that go through the narrow way. But you see the broad way, a multitude of people, a mass of people, everybody, as it were, is going to go through that broad way. What is the lesson, friends? Here we see Peter is walking on water. Now, in the Bible, water is symbolic of something. What is water symbolic of, friends? In the book of Revelation, chapter 17 and verse 15, the Bible says, and the waters which thou sawest, where the horse sitteth, are peoples and multitudes and nations and tongues. And so waters in the Bible symbolically represent people, even a multitude or a lot of people. And so here we see that Peter is rising above the standard of the people, literally by faith doing that which Jesus Christ himself did. Friends, I hope you get the picture. But that's not even the lesson though. I wish I could talk about that some more, but we have limited time on these videos. And so the part I want to highlight is the fact that Peter began to walk on water by faith. No, please, don't miss that point. Peter walked on water. Have you ever walked on water before? Would you even attempt to walk on water? I know I wouldn't attempt to walk on water. And so imagine the picture. Literally, Peter walks on water. Imagine the type of faith that would take. Imagine the type of courage that would take. But here we see that Peter literally trusts. He's like, listen, I know Christ. I know this brother's powerful. So I believe that he could even give me the power to walk on water too. And imagine that type of a powerful faith that Peter had. But friends, notice the picture now. Peter now has the faith that Jesus Christ can literally give him the power to walk on water. But another element literally is introduced in the picture. But the Bible says Peter, though he was walking on water, he saw the wind boisterous and he began to be afraid. And because of that fear, and because of that boisterous wind, it began to sink. Friends, watch us now. Here we have two elements. We have the power of God to keep you from sinking in the water. The power of God to keep you walking by faith versus the boisterous wind. Friends, here Peter through his actions showed that he believed that the boisterous wind, strife, temptation, whatever it may be, a symbol of in your life. Peter believed that that boisterous wind was more powerful than the power of Christ to keep him from falling. What? Friends, clearly Peter showed through his actions that he believed that the boisterous wind was more powerful than Christ. And what does this represent? This represents the fact that though Christ promised that we could accomplish the impossible, we look to the boisterous wind and we say, no, there's no way that Christ can keep me. What? Walking on water, doing the impossible in the midst of this boisterous wind. But notice the story though. This is the part where that gets interesting to me. So Peter now sinks, right? Okay, now as Peter is sinking, Jesus Christ lifted him up and caught him. Now, watch the picture now. Clearly, the situation is that the wind is boisterous. Now, in verse 32, I believe, pardon me if I'm wrong, the Bible says when they were coming to the ship, so when Jesus and Peter came back into the ship, the wind ceased. So, when Jesus came and Peter in the ship, the wind ceased, right? Okay, so before Jesus and Peter went to the ship, that means that the wind didn't cease, right? The wind was still boisterous. Now, question. If Peter walked to Jesus, clearly he must have walked some distance, right? Let's say, 10 meters, who knows, right? So Peter walks to Jesus now, and as he walks to Jesus, he begins to sink. Now, both of them have to go back to where? To the ship. Now, hold on. Do you think that they're about to, Peter and Jesus are about to walk on water, but then they're going to swim back to the ship? What? No. Clearly, in order for them to have gotten back to the ship, how did they do it? They had to have walked on water again. Oh, friends, I wish you'd see the picture. Clearly, what did Christ do? When Peter took his eyes off Jesus and put his eye and his mind towards the boisterous wind the first time and he sunk, Christ didn't say, Peter, you're crazy. You know what he did? He lifted him up and he said, Peter, why did you doubt, bro? Why'd you lack faith? Let me show you, Peter. Let me show you that though you doubted, I could show you that this is still possible. Though you thought that the boisterous wind was more powerful than me, I can show you that I can even make you walk on water in the midst of the boisterous wind. And what happens now? Peter and Christ, in the midst of the boisterous wind, walk back on water to go to the ship. Then the ship sees. Friends, what's the lesson? The lesson is the fact that Christ here triumphed literally over the boisterous wind. And Peter literally learned the lesson where I can walk on water. I can experience Christianity and spirituality, not only when times are good, but I can experience Jesus Christ doing the impossible through me, even in the midst of the boisterous wind. What does the boisterous wind represent for you? Problems at home, temptations on every side, addictions. What does it represent for you? No, Christ, you can't make me walk on water. There's too many addictions in my life. No, Christ, I can't walk on water. I used to smoke, I drink, I party, I do all these things. Friends, the Bible is teaching that Jesus Christ, in the midst of your temptation, in the midst of your situation, can make you walk on water. The last thing I'll say is this. Friends, when Peter began to sink, you know what he said? He cried out, Lord, save me. The Bible doesn't say that Jesus waited. The Bible didn't say that Christ could have taught him a lesson and said, see, look at what happens when you doubt me. No, the Bible said immediately Jesus put forth his hand and caught him. To let you know, friends, there is no prayer ever prayed. There's no tear ever cried. There's no voice ever lifted up and saying, Lord, save me, in the which Christ does not immediately answer and respond with stretching out his hand. Friends, Christ is stretching out his hand to you today and asking you, and really asking you, to consider what boisterous wind is there in your life that you believe is more powerful than him. Christ can keep you from falling. Christ can keep you walking. The Bible in the book of Jude, verse 24 and 25 says, now unto him that is able to keep you from falling. Who is that? Jesus Christ. And to present you faultless before the presence of his glory with exceeding joy. Friends, in the book of Colossians chapter 2, the Bible says, the same way you received Christ, so walk ye in him. You received him by faith, continue to walk by faith, even in the midst of the boisterous wind. This is lessons from the life on Peter. Sorry we went a little bit late today, but nevertheless, this is lessons from the life of Peter. Friends, Christ is more powerful than your boisterous wind.